Master, I make mention of you. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Haughton Woods. Book 2nd, Means of Attainment. It has been stated what yoga is of one whose mind is concentrated. This sutra gives the start to the problem, which considers how even one whose mind stuff is emergent may be concentrated. Yukta, in concentration, yoga. 1. Self-castigation and study and devotion to the Ishvara are the yoga of action. And Ishvara from Ich from Ish, controlled, mastery, capable. So it's sort of a word for Lord, but it's the aware, so lowercase in terms of yourself, higher case in terms of divinity. I mean uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, okay. Yoga is not perfected in him who is not self-castigated. Impurity, which is variegated with subconscious impressions, vasana, from time without beginning, coming from hindrances and from karma, into which the meshes of the net objects have therefore found entrance, is not reduced, samvedam, apadyate, except by self-castigation. This is the use of self-castigation, and this kind of self-castigation, not being inhibitory to the undisturbed calm of the mind stuff, is therefore deemed by great sages to be worthy of his anena, the yogin's earnest attention. Recitation is the repetition of purifying formula, such as the mystic syllable, pranava, or the study of books on liberation. Devotion to the Ishvara is the offering up of all actions to the Supreme Teacher, or the renunciation of the fruit of all of these actions. If it be objected that the first book described yoga with its means and with its subordinate divisions, and with its results, and that no reason remains why a second book should be begun, he replies in the words, has been stated. For in the first book, practice and passionlessness were described as means to yoga, and since these two, for one whose mind stuff is emergent, do not instantly come into being, he stands in need of the means taught in the second book in order to purify the sattva. So it's not just that you become a Lucifer, that you become a right type of Lucifer, right? You know, light bringer. Or, you know, clearing of the unnecessary attachments to the structure of consciousness. But you're showing that it's not just, oh, it's a concept there. For by these he quite purifies the sattva and performs the protective ordinances and daily cultivates practice and passionlessness. The state of being concentrated is the state of being undistracted. How could even a man whose mind stuff is emergent be, because concentrated yukta, by means which are to be taught a yogin? This is the meaning. From among these observances which are to be described, having made a selection of some as being rather more serviceable to the beginner, the author of the sutras first of all teaches what the yoga action is. 1. Self-castigation and study and devotion to the Ishvara are the yoga of action. Action, which is itself yoga, is the yoga of action, since it is a means of effecting yoga. Therefore, in the Vishnu Purana, in the dialogue between Kandikya and Ketchidvaja, starting with the passage, at first the yogin who is just beginning to apply himself is called a novice. Yoga Yuj, self-castigation and recitation and the like are set forth, with the words, in him who is not self-castigated, He shows by a negative instance that self-castigation is a means. By the words, from time without beginning, he shows that self-castigation has a subsidiary function, which is serviceable as a means of attaining yoga, variegated by reason of subconscious impressions, from time without beginning, coming with hindrances, and from karma, and therefore that in which the meshes of the net objects have found entrance, that is, inserted themselves. Impurity, which is the excess of rajas and tamas, is not thoroughly reduced without self-castigation. Reduction is through thinning out of that which was closely woven. The objection is raised, even if we have recourse to self-castigation, still in as far as it causes disorders of the humors, it is hostile to yoga. How then is a means to attain this yoga? In reply to this, he says, and this kind is self-castigation should be performed only so long as it does not bring a disorder of the humors. It is the meaning. Such is the mystic syllable. That is such as the hymn to the Purusa, Rigveda 1090. I think that's what RV is. Are the Rudra Mandala, are a Brahmana, are the like from the Veda, are the Brahmana Parayana from the Puranas, Ishvara, that is the supreme teacher, the exalted to him, with regard to whom this hath been said, whatever I do, whether auspicious or inauspicious, whether intentionally or unintentionally, all that is committed unto thee, moved by thee, I do it all. Renunciation of the fruit of all these is doing the actions without attachment to the fruit thereof. And with regard to this, it hath been said, you are concerned with actions only, and never with fruits. Do not be one whose motive is the fruit of actions, nor let your attachment be to inaction. Now, this yoga of action is 2. For the cultivation of concentration and for the attenuation of the hindrances. For when the yoga of action is given earnest attention, it cultivates concentration, attenuates the hindrances to an extreme degree, and will make the hindrances, when they are extremely attenuated, disqualified for propagation, like seeds burned by the fire of elevation. Prasamkhyana. But the subtle insight, which is the discriminative discernment between the sattva and the self, untouched by hindrances, because they are so much attenuated with its text finished, will be ready for inverse propagation. Prate prasava. In order to mention the purpose of this yoga of action, he introduces the sutra with the words for them. 2. For the cultivation of the concentration and for the attenuation of the hindrances. It is objected that if the yoga of action alone is able to attenuate the hindrances, then there is no need of elevation. To this he replies with the words, the extremely attenuated. The yoga of action operates only for the extreme attenuation, but not for the sterilization of the hindrances. But elevation operates for the sterilization of those hindrances. The words, like burned seeds, indicate the burned seeds of winter rice, and the hindrances are the same kind, and as far as both are steriles. The objector says, this may be true, but if elevation alone can disqualify the hindrances from propagation, then there is no need for their attenuation. In reply to this, he says, of these, for it is the hindrances that are not attenuated, the discriminative discernment between the sattva and the self, submerged, grasta, by mighty foe, is incapable of even uprising, still less of sterilizing them. But when the hindrances are quite thinned out and impotent, the discernment, although in opposition to them, does, with the aid of passionlessness and of practice, finally arise. And when the discernment, which is nothing more than the sense of difference between the sattva and the self, is finally arisen, it is untouched by them, that is, not overwhelmed by them, for just so long as it is not touched by them. The subtle insight is so called because its object is subtle, inasmuch as its object is beyond the range of the senses, will be ready for inverse propagation, and that is for resolution. Why? Because its task is finished. In other words, that is said to be of this kind, by which acting is a cause. The task of giving starts to the effects of the aspects, guna, has been finished. Now what are these hindrances? And va, how many are these? So we don't need Scientology. We don't need any of its spin-offs. We don't even need psychologists for the real. When we go through these spiritual processes, path working, contemplating over a text, taking part in ordinances and that sort of thing, going through the yoga stages, thinking our ways through these, experiencing our way through the Kabbalah. It's, this is what this stuff is about. And ultimately we become spiritually self-reliant on ourselves. It's not that the path doesn't exist before us, because it definitely does exist before us in various ways. But anyways, 3. Undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, and the feeling of personality and passion and aversion, and the will to live are the 5 hindrances. This means that the so-called hindrances are 5 misconceptions. Book 1, 8. And when flowing out, make the authority, a vikara, of the aspects, guna, more rigid, make a mutation more stable, swell the stream of effects and causes, and becoming interdependent upon one another for aid, bring forth the fruition of karma. Cause, effect, action. That's not, all karma is karma. It's not, I don't want to cause karma. It's like, are you doing something that's going to have an effect? Yep. Is it the effect of something? Yeah. Is it something itself? Is it what is? Yeah, okay, well, it's karma. Thank you very much. This means that the so-called hindrances are 5 misconceptions. You don't destroy the ego, you get rid of the false egos. And out of the base of what the false egos were attached to, you find the true square, the true cube. These, when flowing out, make the authority, a vikara, of the aspects, guna, more rigid, make a mutation more stable, swell the streams of effects and causes, and becoming interdependent upon one another for aid, bring forth the fruition of karma. He raises a question by saying, now, and replies to it by the Sutra upon undifferentiated consciousness. 3. Undifferentiated consciousness and the feeling of personality and passion and aversion and the will to live are the 5 hindrances. He explains the word hindrances by the words 5 misconceptions. Undifferentiated consciousness, to begin with, is nothing but misconception. The feeling of personality and others also have undifferentiated consciousness as to their material cause and sense. They cannot exist without it. They too are misconceptions, and hence when undifferentiated consciousness is destroyed, there would follow the destruction of them also. He mentions the reason why they should be destroyed, and that they are the cause of the round of rebirths. This he states in the word these. When flowing out, that is, moving continually forth, make the authority of the aspects more rigid, and that is, more powerful, and is consequence, make a mutation more stable, and in successive forms as unphenomenalized primary matter, and as the great thinking substance, and as the personality substance, and they swell, and that is, they intensify, the stream of cause and effect. He shows for what purpose. They do all this in the words one another. The 3 fruitions of karma, distinguished, Book 2, 13, as being birth and length of life, and kind of experience, have their purpose, artha, in the self. That purpose, those hindrances bring to pass, that is, accomplish. Do they accomplish this singly? He says, no. But upon one another for aid. That is, the hindrances aided by the karmas, and the karmas aided by the hindrances. 4. Undifferentiated consciousness, avidya, is the field for the others, whether they be dormant, or attenuated, or intercepted, or sustained. See, you don't get rid of your chakras. You don't get rid of your paths. You only remove the artificial labels upon the wrongful labels. Okay, sometimes labels would be fitting, but you know what I mean. The delusions upon them, the misactions associated with them. Of these five, undifferentiated consciousness is the field or propagative soil. The others are feeling of personality, and the rest of the five hindrances. In four kinds of forms, the dormant and the attenuated and the intercepted and the sustained. One of these four, what is the dormant state? It is the tendency of the hindrances which remain merely potential in the mind towards the condition of seed. I'm not talking prosperity gospel. You sow your seed by giving me money. Yes, giving. If I ever get donations, it's going to be for the work. It's not going to be for my own pocket. Thank you very much. And I'm not going to tell people, oh, don't take care of the poor. Give it to the church. No, nonsense. The awakening of that dormant hindrance is the coming face to face with a particular object which makes that dormant hindrance manifest. But for one who has reached elevation, prasamkhyana, and whose hindrances have become burned seed, there is not that awakening of the hindrances, even when he is brought face to face with the object which manifests them. For out of what can burned seeds germinate? Remember the Nabi, that Aramea to Arabic word for the exemplar prophet, the person who brings out the inner fruit that germs. Noon is a sprouting seed. So that's being brought out. There's a house for it, and the letter, the Yud letter, as it's going out. So that's a sort of. Anyways, for the reason that the fortunate Kuchala man whose hindrances have been dwindled away is said to have been in his last body, Chara Madeha. In him only the burned state of the seeds, the fifth stage of the hindrances, is found, and not in other persons. So although the hindrances are existent, the vitality, samarthya, of the seed is said to be already burnt. Accordingly, even when the object is face to face, there is no awakening of these hindrances. And thus dormancy and the failure of the burned seed to propagate have been described. 2. Attenuation is now described. The hindrances, when overpowered, upahata, by the cultivation of their opposites, become attenuated. When this is in the case, the other hindrances intercept the attenuated hindrances repeatedly and move forth actively again. In this or that attenuated form, atmana, in that case, they are called intercepted. How is this? Since, for instance, when one is in love, no anger is felt, inasmuch as, when one is in love, anger does not actively move forth, and love, when felt in one direction, is by no means unfelt towards another object. When Chaitra is known to be in love with one woman, it is not assumed that he is out of love for another woman. Nowadays it is, but, for some reason. But, of course, that's not excusing extramarital affairs. Remember, one of the 4 rules is no illicit sex, no gambling or cheating. Insurance that you're not forced to have, by the way. No unlawful shedding of blood, no intoxication. There's main commandments, as it would be said. Some people would say, there's the 10 commandments of yoga. Okay. I don't remember what list that is, because the unlawful shedding of blood, illicit sex, the cheating, gambling, the cheating mentality actions, and the no intoxication are the 4 ones that I tend to remember. Rather than his love finds fluctuation fixed in this direction. In other directions, its fluctuation is yet to come, for this third fluctuation is for the moment both dormant and attenuated and intercepted. For that fluctuation which is fixed upon an object is situated, udara, no one of all. These 4 passes beyond the limits of the hindrances, and therefore all four are to be rejected. If this is so, tarhe, what is the hindrance that is intercepted or dormant or attenuated or sustained? The answer is now given. Uchyate. It is exactly true that all hindrances are forms of undifferentiated consciousness, but only when these hindrances are particularized do they become intercepted, and so on. For just as these stages cease when their opposites are cultivated, so they become manifest, abhivyakta, when changed into the phenomenal form, anjana, by the operation of their phenomenalizing conditions, vyan yaka. So all these hindrances, without exception, are varieties of undifferentiated consciousness. Why is this? Since it is undifferentiated consciousness and nothing else that pervades all hindrances, whatever perceptible object is given a form by undifferentiated consciousness, and nothing else that pervades all hindrances, whatever perceptible object is given a form by the undifferentiated consciousness, it is that object which is permeated by the hindrances. Whenever there is a misconceived idea, they become apperceived, and when undifferentiated consciousness dwindles, they too dwindle away. And I am guessing maybe I should make for the last one. He shows that the hindrances are to be rejected and that they have their root in undifferentiated consciousness. For undifferentiated consciousness is the field for the others, whether they be dormant or attenuated, or intercepted or sustained. When he asks one of these four, what is the dormant state? His intention is to say that there is no proof for the real existence of hindrances if they are not performing in their particular purposeful activity. He tells the answer in the words, in the mind. The hindrances may not indeed perform their purposeful activity, but in the case of the discarnate and of those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter, they assume the form of seed and exist merely potentially as curds exist in milk. For other than discriminate insight, there is nothing to cause the sterility of these hindrances. Oh, maybe that's it. I'm subconsciously thinking my stomach has growled a lot more during doing this series, but it's all that talk of milk. And look at me. My people don't digest dairy too well. For other than discriminative insight, there is nothing to cause the sterility of these hindrances. Hence, the discarnate and those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter, who have not obtained discriminate discernment, have their hindrances dormant until such time as these hindrances reach the time of their limitation. But when they reach that, since the hindrances revert once more, they come face to face with the various objects of sense. Thus, these hindrances are those of which the basis is merely potential. In this way, their potential rising into consciousness is described. By the words tendency towards the condition of seed, their potentiality of action is indicated. To meet the question, why? In the case of even one whose discriminative discernment, hindrances are not dormant, he says, for one who has reached elevation. And his last body, in other words, in his case, no other body will be produced, with reference to which this body of his could be called prior. Not in other persons, in other words, in the discarnate and similar states. An objection is raised, since there is total destruction of any existing thing, what we ask becomes of the force of the magical powers of this kind of yoga. Are not the hindrances awakened when face to face with objects? Magical hopefully means the art and science of spirituality. Let's not use the word as hate speech, thank you very much. You can add words to it that describe, evil magic, jinn magic, whatever. But are not the hindrances awakened when face to face with objects? In reply to this, he says, existent. Although the hindrances are existent, still in their state as seeds, they are burned by the fire of elevation. Prastham kyana. This is the meaning. To the opposite of the hindrances is the yoga of action, by the cultivation, by the following up, of this, the hindrances become overpowered, that is, attenuated, or we may say that the thinking focus to a point. Some jnana is the opposite of undifferentiated consciousness, that the knowing of distinctions is the opposite of the feeling of personality, and the detached attitude, madhyastya, is the opposite of passion and aversion, that is the cessation of the thought of continuance, the opposite of the will to live. 3. He describes the interception with the words, when this is the case, either because overcome by any one of the hindrances which moved actively forth, and because resorting exclusively to objects they intercept repeatedly and move actively forth in one form or another, that is, come into appearance, eviter bhavante, either as the result of using aphrodisiacs and the like, or as a result of the weakness of the hindrances which overcome it. By the repetition he signifies the reiteration of the interception and of the moving actively forth. Thus the differences of this from the aforesaid dormant hindrances have been described. When love moves actively forth, anger which is different in kind is overpowered, or again love itself upon one object overpowers, though like in kind, another love which is set upon a different object. This he states by the word love, the fluctuation which is yet come to be understood as having threefold course according to the circumstances. With this in mind, he says, for this, the pronoun this refers only to the hindrances from the fluctuation which is yet to come. It does not refer to Chaitra's love, because that love is intercepted. Or he describes the sustained hindrances in the words upon an object. If someone suggests as an object that the sustained hindrance, since it hinders men, might be properly called a hindrance, but that when the others do not hinder, and so can by no means be called hindrances, he says in reply, all these four, they do not pass beyond the limits of the hindrances, that is, beyond the limits of the thing expressed by the word hindrance, when they become changed into the sustained state. Therefore, they too are to be rejected. This is the point, presupposing that the unity of the hindrances, unity as far as the quality of being a hindrance goes, raises an objection in the words. If this is, so what? By showing, although they are of the same kind, and as far as they are hindrances, they are particular because of the different previously described states. This he does in the words. The answer now is given, it is true. The objector says, this may be true. The hindrances may result from undifferentiated consciousness. Still, why should they cease when undifferentiated consciousness ceases? For surely, no one would suppose that a piece of cloth ceases to be when the weaver ceases to be. In reply to this, he says, all these, without exception, the distinctions are only apparently distinctions, that is to say, they do not exist separately from this undifferentiated consciousness. He asks a question in the words, why is this? He gives the reply in the words, all hindrances. And this same point is made clear by the word whatever. Is given a form, and that is falsely attributed, and the rest is easy. In the case of those who have been resolved into entities, the hindrances are dormant. For yogins, attenuated. And in case of those attached to objects, hindrances are intercepted or sustained. This is the summarizing stanza. So it's very important to remember that when you attain a state, it's like, live as if there's not going to be a reincarnation. That you weren't reincarnated. Live in that way for itself and, focus on the development with what you have, right? At this point, undifferentiated consciousness itself is described. 5. The recognition of the permanent, of the pure, of pleasure and of self in what is impermanent, impure, pain, and not self, is undifferentiated consciousness. It is the recognition of the permanent in an impermanent effect. For example, that the earth should be perpetual and the sky with the moon and the stars should be perpetual, that celestial beings are deathless. Likewise, in the impure and highly repulsive body, there has been the recognition of purity, and it has been said, because of its abode, and because of its origin, and because of its sustenance, and because of its exudations, and because of its disease, and because of its needs and constant cleaning, the learned recognize that the body is impure. Well, yeah, there's definitely problems, but nothing wrong with the body is really the best means for, that we have been provided with. Whichever body we got, it's the best vehicle we got for the purposes that we're meant to fulfill. Namaste. The prayer of me and you.